back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
And welcome back to The Law Show on CL 650. Joining us in the studio today, we have Rudy Kisher and Gordon Maynard from MKS Law. We have the K and the M here. The S is not here today.
No, the S is not here.
It's not today, so it's nice to have you. And we are talking about, obviously, immigration and citizenship law. And we had in the first segment talking about more people coming across the Canadian border seeking a refugee status. And now we have a situation where the United States, the presidency is focused, it seems to be efforts on the southern border to Mexico and stopping the number of Mexicans coming into the United States. All the rhetoric around building a wall, and there are walls and fences there now, but it doesn't cover the whole border. As I mentioned, I was down near Tijuana, and there's a big wall there, but that's only part of the border. Then we have the Canadian side, and explain what's changed with the relationship between Canada and Mexico in the last little while.
Well, I mean, until December 1st, 2016, any Mexican that wanted to come to Canada would have to apply for visas. That means they have to go through a process where they make an application at an embassy or a consulate and ask for permission to be able to get on a plane or a boat to come to Canada. Mm-hmm. That visa requirement's been in place since 2009. And the reason that visa requirement came into play is, like in 2009, we almost had 10,000 refugee claimants from Mexico make claims in Canada. So to give you an idea on the numbers, Canada immigrates right now about 305,000 people a year. Out of that, about 10% of that is about 30,000 refugees a year. In that year, we had 10,000 claims alone
from one country,
from Mexico. And that was our major claim country, was coming from Mexico. And, you know, the shocking part of that, only 90%, less than 90% of those claims were granted. So it means 90% of those people, you know, you take...
Sorry, less than 10% or less than 90%?
Less than 10%, sorry. 90% were refused. So
that's coming back to our first point, you know, with the anxiety in the United States about foreigners and people living in the United States saying, well, maybe we'll have a better shot in Canada coming to the border. And then Mexico, people feeling, obviously, the United States isn't a welcoming place. Hey, we'll book a trip to Canada and we'll ask for a refugee. But you're saying that 90% are unsuccessful in the past.
In the past. So to give you an example, in 2015, we only had 120 refugee claims from Mexico, going from 10,000 to 120. So the system has worked. Mm-hmm. The Trudeau government announced, you know, it was a bone of contention between Mexico and Canada, being a member of NAFTA. Why should we need a visa to come to Canada? And what Canada launched starting December 1st was the electronic travel authorization. Mm-hmm. So now it's far easier. They don't need a visa, but what they do need is something similar to a visa. You could call it Visa-like if you want. It's an electronic travel
Visa-light, almost.
Visa-light. Mm-hmm. It can be done online, so you don't have to go to a consulate.
I had to do this to go to Australia.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, and this is another, quote unquote, Commonwealth country, you know, and, but I don't find these things oppressive. Like, I just had to go and get a China.
That's because you answered all the questions correctly.
Yes.
Try answering one incorrectly and see what happens.
Well, I just got a visa to go to China. And, you know, I wouldn't expect anything else, to be honest with you. And it wasn't that hard of a process. It was 2 days and it was done.
Yeah, so the electronic is very easy, actually. I mean, you know, $7. So the cost is only $7, and the processing time is about 2 minutes, unless, as Gordon points out,
unless you say I do have a health problem, or unless you say yes, I do have a prior criminal conviction for a DUI, and then the process is not going to take 7 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Yeah.
So why shouldn't we be allowed to ask those questions?
You know, we had a situation where if we wanted to question people in detail, we required them to apply for a visa. Everybody else was sort of trusted. Mm-hmm. If you're from Australia, Europe, US, you came to the border and you say, hi, I'd like to enter. Mm-hmm. And I always said, this is my personal opinion, that we never asked too many questions because we didn't want to know the answers.
Don't ask questions you don't want answers to,
Yeah, do you really want to know how many people coming to Canada have a DUI in their background? Because once you do, then you have to deal with it.
But
we've created a situation where we are asking those questions.
But I just think that some of these things are silly. Like if you had you were charged with drunk driving and 30 years ago, I mean, you could have been 21 or something like. Mm-hmm. Why does that stick with you through your whole life? And
because the way we write our laws, our law casts a broad net.
Yeah.
A prior conviction 30 years ago for a DUI offense is equivalent to a Canadian criminal code offense, and it makes you inadmissible to Canada. The only release that they've put out there is that if 10 years have passed since completion of sentence, they will deem it to have been rehabilitated. Otherwise, you have to make an application to say you're rehabilitated or apply for a temporary resident permit. So this is paperwork, these are applications, and they are going to delay your entry into Canada, and that's what the ETA is going to ferret out.
And that's where we help, not to put a little, shameless plug in, but that, it's created work for us because people are applying
if everybody was easy come, easy go, we would have work.
No borders would put it. If they didn't need passports, we'd be out of business for sure. But,
so what do you think are fair restrictions for people traveling in and out of our country? I mean, having a border is, we're a sovereign country. We should be able to say who's allowed to come in and out. And, a lot of the rhetoric that's being propagated from right-wing parties in Europe and obviously in the United States is a lot of people see as extreme, but there is an element of common sense in there too. It's like you should have to be able to control your own. You should have control over your own destiny.
Of course,
right?
and I don't think anybody disputes that. And it's fair to have rules about who should enter Canada and who should not. All right, but if you're going to do that, and if you're going to cast those rules broadly, then you're going to have a fair and efficient bureaucracy to separate the wheat from the chaff and say,
do we have that?
No. That's the problem.
I disagree with Gordon on that. I think the ETA has worked fairly well for 95% of the people that don't, or probably even higher, that don't have any issue. Most people don't have a criminal record that are coming to Canada.
I am only concerned with people who do have issues. When you have an issue, and if you say, I've got that 30-year-old DUI, what do I do? If the bureaucracy says, well, go get all your court documents and submit them to us and let us look at them before we decide. Now you're into the bureaucratic process, and you're not getting an ETA until they're through with that.
And what is the timeline on something like that?
I wish I had an answer to say exactly how long it is. I can tell you that if it wasn't a deemed rehabilitation case...
10 years.
Yeah. Then you're going to have to apply for rehab or apply for a TRP, and that can be a 6-month or 1-year process.
And you just want to come and visit your grandma.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, but from a Canadian perspective, right, from somebody whose maybe father died from somebody that was hit, by somebody who was a drunk driver, you're saying, well, I don't want that person in Canada.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's a fair restriction if we're restricting people who've got a criminal record.
Our law isn't that precise, though. We set it up so that there is discretion. We start off by saying if you have that conviction, you're inadmissible. But we do have release avenues. Now you need to make those release avenues work in an efficient manner.
Okay.
You want the right decision in an efficient time frame.
All right. The phone rings, ring, ring, ring. Hi, MKS. Gordon here. What are most people that are not able to get through on these ETAs? What is the hang-up typically? Is it a prior conviction?
Or a health issue.
And it can be any health issue.
Or have you had a prior removal order? Have you ever been turned down on a visa and they want information on it? It's just the details of asking for more information while Canada, in that faceless bureaucracy that exists behind the computer screen, tries to deal with your particular situation.
And you're saying it can be months and months and months.
It can be years. It can be in exceptional cases where you have recent convictions that require a rehab application. Or you need to make a TRP. And if you're doing that through
what
a
is
visa,
a TRP?
That's temporary permission to come into Canada, notwithstanding your inadmissibility. It's a fix-it, but it requires an application. And that's going to take maybe a lesser period of time, but let's say 1 to 3 months would not be unusual, unless you can come and make that application right at the border.
I'm on the Border show, the TV show. I can't remember what it's called. Border.
Yeah.
They have people that come and they say, well, I was charged with a drinking and driving offense many years ago, and they do the paperwork to let them in on this short-term Band-Aid is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you can do it at the border.
But that's the problem. So now this ETA
is for flying
has removed this whole problem. So you can't get that at the border anymore because you're not at the border.
Sure.
Right? So what we've done is push out the perimeter, and this is sort of an agreement with our security partners like the U.S. and England and Australia and New Zealand. We're all moving to sort of push out our perimeter. So all these countries are now moving that you need an ETA. So what we're preventing is this becoming a problem at a border. Much easier to deal with this person when he's sitting abroad in Mexico or whatever and saying, okay, you want to come here? Well, you get your paperwork first, as opposed to, well, now you're at my airport.
Yeah, what do I do with
I've got
you
an
now?
officer sitting here that I'm paying $60 an hour. You're taking up space, and I've got to do it.
$60 an hour. I got to get a new job.
No, but it might be a case. It might be a case where a reasonable officer could make that temporary entry decision quickly and reliably. But now you've pushed it off, so that person cannot come to the border to get that decision made. Now you're limiting them to the paperwork process. So, and again, you have now asked the question of everybody. You're no longer picking and choosing who you ask the question to.
Yeah, I think you said be careful what questions you ask because you might not like the answers.
Exactly.
Now, quickly before we have a break, is there a group of 5 countries? They call it the something five? The Five Eyes. What is that? Because I've been hearing that a lot in regards to security through terrorist activities around the world. And Canada's a member.
I think it's Canada, U.S., U.K., Australia, and New Zealand.
Yeah, that's the 5 countries. So we have enhanced security sharing. So before, for example, it was easy for border people to get access to the United States in terms of what your criminal record was through CPIC. Now it's easy there's information sharing agreements with Canada and the UK and New Zealand and Australia. So before, when somebody, the officer wouldn't even ask a question, if you're coming from Australia, did you have a criminal record? Because there was no way for him to check. But now he has that ability to check.
But these are all like-minded countries. I mean, that's the problem. Is you need to have more. If you really want security, you have to have more people involved, right?
Yeah, but
more countries involved.
You have to do it with people you trust, and that you have a similar outlook, which I think it speaks volumes to the amount of trust among those 5 countries, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so we kind of touched on Mexico. do you think that's going to affect, like you said years ago? We had 10,000 people seeking refugee claims here.
The agreement that we have with Mexico to lift the visa requirement also includes a provision that if the refugee claims climb up, then we withdraw the visa.
Oh, okay.
So there's exemption.
Yeah. So I haven't seen any stats yet on the first 4 months in terms of the numbers increasing, but we're waiting to see how that goes.
All right. When we come back, we're going to shift from the Canadian border to the Mexican border to visas required for people to work back and forth across the Canada-U.S. border, called an H-1B. We'll find out more about that next on The Law Show on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.